Welcome to the podcast where relationships, confidence, and determination all converge into an amazing, heartfelt experience. This is Speaking from the Heart.
Welcome back to episode number 125 of Speaking from the Heart. Today we will have Elaine Benfield join us, and Elaine is an experienced software leader with over 20 years of expertise in marketing. Following significant life changes during her 50th year, Elaine embarked on a mission to share inspiring stories of remarkable women, crafting narratives that empower and motivate. Based in Atlanta, Georgia, she actively participates in Pride and Human Rights campaign initiatives and dedicates her time to volunteering with dog charities. Outside of her professional pursuits, Elaine cherishes moments of travel alongside her family and friends. And I have to say, this woman-focused episode really digs into the core of why it's so important not only to have a marketing background to be able to sell yourself, but yet at the same time, why stories matter. I think we volunteer in a variety of different ways, not only in the nonprofits that we engage with, but in the ways in which we're willing to help others. Being able to build a professional career also means that not only do you have to worry about relationships, but you have to find standards in which you can find your happiness in. But the biggest key, which we'll talk about even later on, is that it's the vulnerability to help others, to help them see what their value is all about. But with that, let's go to the episode. All right, we're here with Elaine Benfield. Elaine, thanks for sharing your heart with us
Thank you.
today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I really have been excited to do this interview because you got a lot going on in your life and a lot of different things. So I already let the audience know a little bit about you, and I just want to jump right into it because one of the first things that stood out to me, and this is because I have done a full-time job and I still do a full-time job with IT procurement. And I noticed that you are an experienced software leader and you've done a lot of years with software. So I'm curious, what got you into that and what also jumped you into the marketing field? Because those are some unique dynamics and I just want our audience to know a little bit. And I'm curious myself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I ended up going to the University of Delaware and have a consumer economics background. I thought I'd be the next Ralph Nader. I lived in DC working for a lobbying firm, NFIB, small business lobbying firm for a couple of years, and then just made that choice of, oh, I don't really want to be a lawyer. What do I want to do next? I ended up living in Europe and then went to Boston to get my MBA. And a professor in class said, hey, you really should look at high tech. And I was like, I have no idea what that means. And so I ended up getting an internship, ended up getting into kind of the field of public relations, but really liked it from the technology side. And so I started my career with really trying to tell the story for technology vendors, but a simplistic marketing view. I look at it as I'm dangerous enough from a technology standpoint, but I want to use real world words to help narrate what a company is doing and can make businesses better. So I kind of fell into that and I've been doing it. I'm going to age myself over 25 years. Been in small companies, large companies, been all across the Boston area, Atlanta, and just love it. Love high tech. With AI, I'm sure everyone's really understanding technology can really advance our world.
Don't worry, you don't look a day over 20, so don't think
Oh, I like you already.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew you would. But what led you into sharing stories that help empower women? I'm kind of curious where the connection is with that because my listeners are probably like, wait, software and then empowering women. I mean, yeah, there's some indirect correlations, but what led you into that?
So it's interesting. Over the years, I really just had this great opportunity to work with men and women. But what was always interesting is women, it's few and far between. I really struggled finding the women that inspired me. And then I started having these great relationships with women in tech that somehow their stories are never told. No offense, but women tend to, and in my experiences, women in technology are a little bit more in the background. And so for me, I always wanted to find a voice for these women. And I always say that history is always an interesting path, but I want to talk about her story. Why is a woman successful in tech? How did they get there? And how are they breaking barriers? I now have colleagues I worked with 15 years ago that are now CEOs. And what I've seen is the market is shifting a little. And that's why I just, because I have this network of amazing women in technology, I just have a great network of and community of women. But tech to me is I want to tell these women's stories.
Did you just say her
It's her
stories?
stories. I bought the right.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
name.
So
Yeah.
you always hear her story, but I want to tell more than one. So I own the rights to herstories.com. And to me, it's the multiple stories. And I joked with you before that I don't discredit men, love men. And I want to hear men's perspective for women's stories. Or what do they think of my 17-year-old son loves talking about how he sees women being reflected in his generation. But to me, I really want to focus on women that won't tell their story. And every time I tell a woman, I say, you're inspiring. They're like, am I? Why? And they're always surprised. They don't see themselves as inspiring.
I find that really fascinating because I know there's been a generation of men and women that have had issues with being able to feel like they are valued or recognized. I know for me, being a millennial, sometimes I have that issue of feeling like I'm recognized and I have to kind of stand out. And I think that's where we got that concept of participation trophies growing up. But I think we overdid it a little bit too, because we need to learn the hard facts of life. But you saying something interesting about women in particular, because with your website, which I have up and I'm looking at it, and for my listeners, I'll have it in the episode notes too that you could go check out. You have a podcast, you have videos, you have blogs. Are you trying to not just tell the story in a variety of different ways to help get that story out? Or is there a different cause or a different reason for getting the women's stories out? Because I think it's one thing to be able to say, yeah, we need to break that glass ceiling, which I've always heard. And women have definitely been doing that over the last 20 years, I think, in my view. But has there been more of a motivation to get those stories out
Yeah,
there?
and I think people are consuming content differently. It's funny because people stop me and they're like, wait a second, are you doing her stories? And they're like, oh, I listen to you on Apple. And then some people are like, oh, I love you on YouTube. I'm trying to have whatever medium someone wants to listen to women's stories, they can, whether it be me writing from personal experience and just really any way you want to listen to women or honestly stories, I want to provide it. And I get people that really like kind of all combinations. I'm always surprised that it's like, oh, you listen on Spotify, you listen just whatever way you want to.
I have to do an informal market survey at this point. So, which medium, Elaine, works the best that you hear a lot about? Is it audio? Is it video?
My
What do you
impression
hear?
is most of my friends, I say this honestly, are like, oh, we miss you. I'll see you on YouTube because I live here and a lot of my friends are global. So they're like, oh, I liked seeing you today, or Instagram because they get to see me more live. But I would say 90% are listening to me on a podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts. People are walking, running. I get texts from family friends saying, hey, I just listened to this episode I was working out at the gym. So it's that to me, I think, honestly, is probably the most popular. But I do get the interesting with YouTube that people are like, oh, want to see your face again because I'm not around all the time.
You heard it here, folks. It's the audio way to go, not exactly video, which is why I'm just audio right now, with aspirations to maybe do video
Yeah,
one time. But yeah, you proved my point. So thank you. I'm
glad to
glad that
help.
I did this survey with you. So, Elaine, there was something else that really stood out to me about your bio, and it's that you participate in pride and
Mhm.
human rights campaigns initiatives. So, I'm scratching my head again, thinking, okay, so we got the women, and you've been in software, you've done
Mhm.
marketing. How does this sort of facet of your life fit into the bigger puzzle pieces?
Yeah, I always volunteered with different causes. I always wanted to, just my whole life. My father was a big activist growing up in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I really want to help everyone. Everyone has a voice. And so I started volunteering in local community. There's a wonderful store, Lost and Found, here in Atlanta that helps LGBTQ plus kids that are homeless. And so I really started getting involved in that maybe 15, 20 years ago. And then my company said, hey, we want to start an Atlanta chapter for Pride. Are you interested in being one of the co chairs? And so it kind of evolved from that, that I just am really passionate about, you know, there should be no discrimination. Everyone should be equal across any race, who you love. And it just kind of took off from that just being who I am as a fundamental belief.
Is there a personal reason as to why, though? Because I've always found that there's a motivation inside of us that drives us to make this happen in our lives, this cause. For example, one of the biggest things that I've been wanting to help people out with is to help
Mhm.
empower them. So I've worked with a domestic violence shelter for a number of years called the Shalom House here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, that does that sort of work. And I always enjoyed their work. I took a step away because of the business and other shifting things. But for you, is there a reason why you do this work personally?
I almost think it's foreshadowing because I had that in my DNA helping. And then it led into my child at the time was 17 and ended up coming out as a trans girl, trans woman. And so to me, that correlation of I'm that open that within 5 days of my child discovering that light bulb moment going, I feel like I'm in the wrong body, there was no question. My daughter knew that I would accept it, love it, embrace it. Obviously, take a pause to go, let's make sure going through psychiatrists and doctors and make sure this is the right path. But there was no lack of love or support. I struggled with pronouns at first, but because I was so open and they saw me, I marched in pride parades. What I say is I really believe, and the kids knew that. So I think that that kind of led into really foreshadowing that they are allowed to be who they're meant to be because of my acceptance and the volunteering.
Well, I think I might have just fallen into why that reason is. And that's really interesting. I have friends that have had transgendered kids that they are raising. And I've had clients that I've worked with that have wrestled with this sort of subject matter too. And I'm kind of curious of your thoughts because you're a parent of one. What does it mean to you when your child opens up about that? Was that a scary moment? Was it something like, oh, I'm not really prepared for it? I think there's some listeners that have a misconception or maybe a misunderstanding, perhaps, of how to best navigate through these sort of situations. And I'm wondering if you have any advice for them, especially if they have this
Well,
conversation.
we talked about it a little bit briefly offline. The biggest fear I had when I started volunteering is homeless LBGT kids, once they come out to their parents, the suicide rates are astronomical. And there wasn't a doubt in my mind. I'm not going to deny I was shocked. There were no signs that my child didn't feel that they were in the right body. But my first question, when my daughter said, hey, I have a friend that's just came out, she's a trans woman. And then I looked over and I'll never forget driving in the car and said, do you feel you're in the wrong body? And my daughter instantly said yes. And you look and go, no
Wow.
matter what, and so many of my friends and therapists have said, how'd you know to ask that? And it was instinct. I can't explain it. I just knew. And to me, my child's my child. You can throw any name you want. I look at my baby who I birthed. That is my child. I don't care what you call my child, but seeing her become who she's meant to be, she is happier every day. I think she says it, she was suicidal, which we didn't know. If I would have done things differently and not been so accepting, we would have a different conversation right now. Listen to your child. They're not trying to do this. And I know there's always the cases, there's some children that want attention. That is not the case with the majority. Kids are struggling. They should be accepted. And I think parents just have to find that path of it's your child. I know for me, it was black and white. It was like, this is my child. I don't care. I just want to make sure I navigate it to make the transition the easiest as possible.
Well, building off of that, how do you make that transition as easy as possible? Because I think sometimes our society doesn't make it easy to have that sort of roadmap. And I hate to say it, but I think even our government sometimes makes it very difficult for some people to feel like they're accepted in society. So I'm kind of curious, what are some things that you have done to make that transition a lot easier, especially for, is it
My
your
daughter.
daughter? I just want to be
Yeah, it's my daughter.
respectful.
My
It
daughter,
is your
Hannah.
daughter? Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Great. Well, hi, Hannah, if you're listening to
Well,
this.
she will. She's happy on spreading the word,
Great.
really. And then she's also being more active vocally as well. I looked at it as I'm a planner. So when Hannah first came out to me, I was like, I'm so supportive. And she almost tried to threaten me, which she'll agree with. She said, I turn 18 in November. So if you don't support me, I'm going to do this without you anyway. And I kept saying, I'm going to support you, but let's go see your pediatrician. Let's go see a therapist. Let's go see a specialist. And so pretty much from mid February to May, we saw all these doctors for me to be okay with HRT, hormone replacement therapy. And I just knew speaking with the doctors made me at ease. So, any parent that has a child, make sure you do your due diligence to speak with professionals. I'm not an expert in this, but I knew this is what my child wanted. I had thousands of questions. I had a notebook with all these, what about this? And what if she changes her mind? And what if having doctors, and Atlanta has some great resources, and a lot of places do. But you brought up the government's really in everyone's business right now. I can say truthfully, and you can tell which way I lean politically. But I went and marched at the Capitol in Atlanta. Who are you, Mr. Congressman, Congresswoman, to tell my child what's right? And some laws were passed no matter how much we tried to campaign and fight. And it's fighting the medicine and fighting what they need to be on. It's not your business. That is our job as a parent. And I understand there's difficult situations, but I don't regret for a moment helping to support that for my child who needs the medicine. And then luckily, by chance, Hannah turned 18, and then those laws aren't affecting, but children that are young, we're going to have a higher suicide rate. Kids that can't get the treatment they need.
Yeah. And I have to say a few things. First off, I've always said to my guests, I've said to my listeners, and from anybody that's new, I'll say this again. Here at Speaking from the Heart, I don't condone any sort of practice, because here's the thing. We all come from different backgrounds in our life, and why those sort of things happen for a reason are destined or designed to happen for that reason. And we work with what those circumstances are. So there's no judgment from here. I don't have any leaning towards any sort of particular side, because what I find to be really interesting about just what you shared is that you are in this fight. And I don't understand why people have to fight for it when we can all just be accepting. Maybe I'm a hippie because of my mom. Maybe that's part of what it is. She grew up in the 60s and 70s, peace, love, no war, that sort of thing, with Vietnam happening. I don't know. But I just think about the fact that we can make this all accepting for other people. And I find that just from what you said with me, you're a very accepting person, which, don't worry, I have a question about that.
Yeah.
But before I
Yeah.
get to that, there's something that stood out on your website that if there wasn't enough happening, there's this. You have a ex-husband who identifies as being
Yeah.
gay. So obviously you were married, you had your daughter, and here we are. We're talking about your ex-husband who you find out he's gay. So why did that all happen? Because I guess now you've been raising your daughter as a single parent.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. And in fairness, so I was married with my ex-husband for 22 years, and I have a stepdaughter too. So I've had my stepdaughter in my life. She's 24 now. So she's a fabulous mother and a great stepdad, but she's been instrumental in my life as me being a mom. So I have her, and then I had my daughter, Hannah, and I have also a 17-year-old son. So I personally think Hannah coming out and finding her authentic self gave my ex-husband almost the freedom for him to be authentic with who he is. He came out to me. So Hannah came out in February, and July, my ex-husband told me he cheated on me. And of course I was like, okay, we've been together. I feel that we were happy. Really didn't see much conflict. We worked, is the way I would say it. Just was my best friend. He was the air that I breathed. And when he said he cheated, but then he said it was with a man, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, could not believe. I would have thought it would have been a woman. I just didn't quite understand. And I really think seeing him evolve, we tried to make it work, but then the revelation that he cheated on me for about 10 years with hundreds of people, it was a choice that I made, that my kids and I together, as the four of us, just said, it's not the life we want. He needs to find his own path, and we just weren't destined to be together forever. Hardest thing, I can say it now, and we've been divorced now 6-7 months. I'm thrilled he found who he's meant to be. He lives with his boyfriend. He's happy for being finally who he was always meant to be. So it is an interesting kind of the way my world worked in some ways.
Yeah. And I often don't have people on the show that said, yeah, I'm very accepting of it. Usually it's like, yeah, they moved on and I found myself, and that's what's really important. But you look back and go, yeah, we had our time and we had our moment. We're kids, but yeah, I'm okay with this being the way it is now. And he has his own path and I have my own path. I think you're the most accepting person that I've had on the
Well,
show.
I've had, and I have great therapists, but I've also learned I loved him for so long. Why wouldn't I love him to be happy? I think he did shitty things. I find the betrayal still hard for me. I'm not interested in dating yet. But I look at it going, you know what? He is figured it out. And that's great. I wish he would have figured it out before we got married. I wish he would have figured it out even 10 years when he said he was cheating for half of our marriage. But I look and go, I have these three amazing kids. I would do it all over again, the bone crushing pain just to have them. And so as he builds his happiness, I realized I've never been happier. I'm taking care of me. I'm taking care of the kids. I get to have a whole new bright future that will lead to wherever it's meant to be. And I'm happy with that. So I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled he has found his path. And now it's my turn to find mine.
Okay, so we gotta pause this because there's a lot of different things with this that you said throughout this whole 21 minutes that we've been talking. Because I find that what you said, I would be like, oh my gosh, I have a husband that doesn't accept me. I have a daughter and gone through this process. You have all these other things happening in your life. I would be a wreck. What makes you feel like you can just keep pushing forward? I mean, there's got to be some sort of inner strength that we're talking about that you got to this point. I mean, what carries you forward? Because you seem like a very energetic person to me, and you're able to carry that forward. So anybody else that would have this happen to them, I think they would feel a little defeated, but it doesn't sound like you're defeated
Yeah,
whatsoever.
my friends ask me all the time. They're like, you're the strongest woman I know. And how'd you do it? And I think you in life have a choice. I can sit there, and I'm not saying I didn't have days where friends picked me up off the floor. My sister picked me off the floor. My kids had to pick me up off the floor. But I remember my darkest moment was when my ex-husband told me I didn't think we were ready to go through the divorce stage. And he told me he fell in love with this boyfriend. Now, mind you, I didn't know he knew him already a year. So there was a lot of lies in between that. He was dating him while we were married and whatnot. However, I remember when he told me the next day, in January 3rd, I couldn't get out of bed. And I remember my 17-year-old son saw me. My two kids brought me food and whatnot. And I said, I'm so sorry you have to see me like that. And my youngest son said, Mom, you've never showed your vulnerable side. The fact that there is something that can take you down, it means you're going to get right back up. And I remember looking, he left the room, and I went and took a shower and said, no one will ever make me feel this low point again in my life. I'm in control of it. I'm in control of the way I feel. And I feel that to me is people have a choice. You can be a martyr, you can be Eeyore, but you know what? Being happy and finding your own way, everyone has the ability to do that. And I'm not saying it's not hard. My father was always happy. My sister's always happy. But it's a choice I make every day to get up and be like, I'm excited for today. And you nailed it. I'm energetic. I'm happy that my kids laugh. They're like, don't talk to us right away in the morning. I don't drink coffee. This is me always. So I feel like you have to move forward. Could you imagine me on coffee? I have friends that are like, don't let her have any.
Yeah.
But it's a choice.
Yeah, don't worry. I had a cup of coffee before we did this episode, so thank goodness that I had that because we would never made it.
But it is a choice, I think, in life that life is so short. I'm going to be 52. How did that happen? I still think I'm 30 something. So I think it is a choice to
22. And
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. But it's a choice.
Yeah. I think we all have choices in life that we have to decide whether we want to move forward, we want to be stuck in where we are. Hey, sometimes we go and walk backwards, thinking that if we walk backwards, we could find that path to move forwards. And there's nothing wrong with any of those choices. However, each of those choices have their own set of positives, mostly consequences.
I agree with you. And did I think this is where I'd be ending up? I thought I'd die with him. My parents were married for 44 years before my dad passed away. I thought he was my end all. And you have to go, is this a life I want? And that's where you have to make that choice. And I loved him so much, I could have tried to stay. And I know a lot of women and men try to make those relationships work. But in the end, it wasn't right for me.
That brings up a very interesting question I have. You're 51. And you have been through the gambit of all these different things that have happened in your life. And I think that some people probably would have fallen down. Some people might have gotten back up, kept on going. You have taken both worlds and you've been able to keep pushing forward, and you build this incredible platform of the podcast, the videos, the blogs, all these different types of resources that are made available. You said something about vulnerability. Why be vulnerable then? I mean, what do you have to gain from that? Because I think even if we wanted to share that, and I've been even told this myself with doing this show, is that, well, you're putting yourself out there, that's going to be used against you. And I say, you're wrong. You're not thinking about this in the way that it might be helping others. You're doing this to be vulnerable because you want to help others, or is there a bigger motive that you're doing this for?
I think if I can help one person, two people, help children, help parents of trans kids, help women that have husbands that have come out as gay, I feel I'm not ashamed. I have friends who are like, I can't believe you're so public. And I'm like, but why wouldn't I be? It's who I am. I'm not ashamed of this is where my life is led. And I have a great example of I have an old coworker who listened to my podcast with my daughter Hannah talking about her coming out. And my coworker, really good girlfriend, said, I'm never heard a trans story from a child's perspective. And she goes, she changed my entire point of view. She actually asked for permission, sent Hannah a note and said, hey, can I post it on Facebook? I want people to hear there's nothing scary. She's a normal child. It's just her path. And to have someone, I have another colleague who has a child that with autism. One of my episodes is about how Hannah's also autistic and on the spectrum. Hearing those stories and people text me and message me and email me saying, thank you. Thank you for being bold enough to help me. I didn't know my child was trans. I'm now not afraid. I had no signs my ex-husband was gay. Really didn't know. If I can help someone, then I feel it's helping everyone on their path. So I would say that.
You're a very giving person as a result of that, I have to say. I mean, I really mean that. I think there's a lot of things that we can easily attribute to, oh, we want to make money off of this, or we want to maybe help somebody and take them underneath a ring. And I'll be honest, as a coach myself, I have given out free services just because I want people to really feel good about themselves. Doesn't mean I do that for everybody, but the circumstances sometimes dictate the need to be able to do that. But one of the things you said, and actually, I don't know if you even knew this about me. I found out late stage in my life that I'm autistic too. So I struggled with that for over 30 years, trying to figure out why am I acting differently than other people? And I never had the right answers, let alone the right support, but that's because of the way times have changed. As we close here, Elaine, I'm really curious. What would you say has been one of the most rewarding things? And I'm talking about everything we've talked about so far. What has been the most rewarding thing to be able to do in your life, and why?
I don't even know if it's to do. By the time this comes out, hopefully I'll be in full recovery. I had a really bad accident walking my dogs nonetheless and had my ankle completely blown out, reconstructive surgery, bed rest. What I think makes me so proud is I had 3 children. My 3 kids rallied for 12 weeks to help me. And it gave me time to reflect, going, you know what I have? I have a great community of people. I have a great inner circle. I've raised my kids so well that 3 meals a day, all the laundry, all the cooking, all the cleaning, they helped do everything for me. I couldn't be more proud. And the friends that jumped in and the meal trains and the flights of people coming. When I mean I couldn't do anything. Luckily, I joke that, well, I could shower and I could go to the bathroom by myself, but everything else, I'm the most proud that I have been honest, and I would say I'm a good friend. And all of it came back during my time of need, because the minute it happened, I thought, oh my God, I don't have Steve. My first thought was I'm alone. And you know what I realized? God, I'm not alone. And that to me, every day I'm thankful for this amazing, like I have thank you notes to send, 50, 60 thank you notes of people that jumped to rally for me. That's what I'm the most proud of. That wherever it's led me, I have this great community that wherever my future leads, they're all will rally behind me.
I think that's so important to know who that circle is. I've talked about it, and I've had a friend even mention to me, it's about the tribe that we have. And It is. And I think that we oftentimes think that we have the right people, but then we realize that we have some of them holding us back. And I understand that completely because I've had a lot of that purging happen in my life. And do I have it perfect 99.9% of the time? No, not even close. Sometimes I'll be lucky if I get 50% on some days. But I think that if we're able to just have that notion in mind that we are staying consistent of the people that help influence us and make us better, that's what's key. And that's why I love your story, because what you're doing is not only writing her story, but you're also writing it for others to be able to do the same. So in your own right, I'm waiting for you to tell your story on your own podcast, which perfect segue. We're at the end, Elaine. I would love for you to spend the last few minutes pitching your website and your podcast and everything that has to go with it. And if anybody's interested, especially with some of the subjects that you talked about today, I'm sure they have more questions. I'm wondering if you can give some information about how they can reach out to you. But I'm going to give you the last few
Oh,
minutes.
wonderful. Thank you so much. So, as we talked about, it's almost a year about the rights to herstories.com. And I am trying to interview and have a weekly podcast with video too. That really, when women inspire me or just inspiring stories, I want to interview them. I have a blog. I am active on TikTok and Instagram and just really trying to tell multiple stories and letting people have their own voices. So definitely check out, I joke, www.herstories.com, and you can see different articles. And I joke, I'm just getting started. It's not even a year old. And I've had this vision 5-6 years ago, and I'm just happy to really tell stories and let people share and really just create this community of people that we're not alone, that everyone's going through something. You friends come, you friends go. But in the end, as we talked about, having that tribe and letting people be honest with who they are and who they're meant to be. And I think that's where her story is. I'm excited to see where it goes. And I keep joking, my labor of love around my real job, but this is something I'm really passionate and can't wait to see where it goes.
I think that's what's important is you're doing it out of passion and you're doing it out of the importance of helping others. And I think just the sense of you using the word vulnerability today is a big deal in our culture, because being vulnerable means that you're weak, according to some people, which I don't think that is absolutely not true. I think it's actually reframing something that has been misframed for hundreds of years. I will go as far as saying that because of the way that our culture has been, let alone the ways in which we interact with each other. And I think it's time to revisit that conversation, and you're doing that through this project. And I encourage my listeners to go check out the website. I've been looking at it throughout our interview today, and there's a lot of different resources available. And I encourage you to check out, spend some time. Yes, I really mean it. Stop listening to Speaking from the Heart and go watch some of her stories.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Elaine, with all that said, you really have enlightened me with not only your viewpoints, but the matter of fact, the things that you've been doing inspire me to make me realize that I still have some growth to do on a personal level when it comes to these subject matters and understanding those things. And I think that's always what's important, is not only what everybody gets out of these sort of stories or these things that we have going on in our lives, but what are the lessons? What are the opportunities that we can gain from them? So with all that said, thanks so much for being on Speaking from the Heart today. I really enjoyed our conversation, and it's been a privilege to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
I want to thank Elaine so much for having this conversation, but also at the same time, being able to share her unique story. I love the fact that she has had such a illustrious career, and she's been able to do so many different types of things, not only with her marketing background, but to actually have a great conversation about professional networking. Building relationships is something that I believe is so needed, especially in this world today. Trying to have such meaningful connections with people, because if you really think about it, the stories that we each have that are instrumental to not only telling what we are all about, but how we're even recognized, how we stand out from those things, is a lost and dying art. It feels like every now and then you see a glimmer of hope with some people really understanding that they need to be unique. But at the same token, seeing social media and other sort of platforms take this sort of generic approach and then you have to fit yourself into that approach so that you stand out, doesn't necessarily mean that you really do. That's why people, let alone even companies, spend millions and millions of dollars every year, upwards of even billions if you have the budget, yes, that's right, with a capital B, to be able to advertise yourself along with your products and services. But the way in which we consume our stories and how we do it differently is really what I want to focus on here as we wrap up today's episode. Because let's face it, the people that we have in our lives, the people that we want to engage in with our lives, mean that we have to share our stories differently. The medium that we try to share it in is just as equally as important as the way in which we tell that story. Public speaking in itself, in which we deliver, whether it's an informative, persuasive, entertaining, humorous, or whatever type of other speech you want to give, is truly, utterly important. But how you deliver yourself, especially with the way that you are, whether you are male, female, or non-binary, no matter which way you want to look at it, being able to help yourself in creating different spectrums of which you are not only equal to everybody else, but yet you also are different from everybody else, is what makes us unique in itself. This has to be the reason why we keep moving forward. Because the level of involvement, especially with trying to deliver that type of story, or even trying to figure out what that kind of relationship is, means that we have to spend some time not only digging into the material of what it is that you're trying to convey, but it also means leaving yourself a little bit open and a little bit vulnerable to being able to tell that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I think what makes Elaine's story and even her illustrious career so important is that she speaks with people. She speaks with people with conviction that she really wants to help build up areas in their lives, whether it's their businesses or themselves, that help them to focus on what's truly important. The most creative types of marketing, whether it's some sort of luxury or necessity, changes the dynamic of what we normally think is what we associate from traditional times, what is really important in buying a product or service. And sure, you might be thinking to yourself, how is this even related to my own personal life? But it is, when you really discover the fact that it's really the ideas and those are the sort of concepts that we focus on when making a decision, whether we are conscious about it or not. Because we have to work through those standards. And that even applies to our relationships, which is ironically enough, just even in our previous episode, talked about the value of having those relationship standards. Being able to have happiness. Being able to create intimate moments with other areas of our lives. Even if we have to look at them in a professional context. But building these areas of happiness means that we also are faced with a choice. Do we carry forward with what is needed to create this opportunity for success? Or do we really want to be happy? Do we really feel that we can be happy with that choice that we've made? But I think that the biggest focus of it all is that we have to look at the people. What is really helping us to create that overall important mark, not only in our lives, but in other people's lives as well? Ultimately, can we be vulnerable and help others to create that value, all in the same token? Well, I'm a coach, and if I really think about this, I think that my job is to make sure that I keep myself vulnerable. I keep myself fresh with the perspectives. I keep myself and my story relevant to those that are seeking what my value is. Because in essence, the value that I am giving, I want to impart onto other people. But it doesn't mean that I force it onto other people, as I have made quite clear in many of these episodes since the very beginning. I think that my focus of it, though, isn't just about helping people tell that story, no matter what kind of concept that might be, but it's also understanding who I'm trying to serve. Because in the real world, I really want to make sure that they have the results that they want to have, what they really desire the most. Being able to tell those stories, regardless of what your background is, no matter what you're volunteering to do to help out, means that you have to be able to learn what you are becoming, which Elaine shared quite a lot of that backstory even in today's show. But we have to learn how to listen. Active listening in itself is a skill that we have to keep developing. It even allows us to have that level of involvement that we oftentimes forget that we need to have in a conversation so that we can speak not only with our husbands and wives, not only with our friends and family, but also with the professionals, the leaders, the lay workers, all the people in between that help support from an administrative standpoint, all the people that actually carry out the work. We have to learn how to build up those areas from all angles if we really are ultimately able to tell the story of our personal, professional, business-related adventures. But the concept of being happy, being able to feel like we can have moments of enjoyment, mean that we have to also realize that we have to open ourselves up to the possibility of having choice and the freedom of making such choice, especially when the stakes are very high. Especially if we want to help a community of people feel like they have the value to keep on moving forward. I know that we often talk about on this show the importance of not only having that sort of dialogue, not only about having those people committed to making our lives successful, but it also means that we have to give ourselves a little. It means that we have to be able to form relationships, confidence, determination, oftentimes in a story that has not been written yet. But we have a choice as to whether we want to move that needle forward, move progress in the right direction, or move it backwards. And I think sometimes to take a step backward, sometimes people think that that means that we have to sacrifice something, that we have to give up a little bit of ourselves. But that's not really the truth. The truth of the matter is, when we have those types of stories that have an awesome beginning, an awesome middle, and an awesome end, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are really full of awesome opportunity. I think the best written story is sometimes dealing with the most difficult of situations, how you're overcoming them in the middle, but at the same time, what the end result is, or the ending of that story, that really matters the most. Regardless of whether you are going from a blue-collar to white-collar job, or vice versa, or maybe even something else is happening, maybe something that's totally out of control. Maybe you are a whistleblower, pointing out the wrongs of something that's occurring and then being fired unjustly. Maybe you have created a situation where you maybe made some remarks that you should have never made, but you got fired and now you're trying to figure out what's the best path to move forward, especially if I have to learn how to be more respectful. Isn't the purpose of a story, especially with the morals that you're supposed to learn from it, also mean that you have the opportunity to also have a purpose along with a vision of what you could be in the future? Maybe that future is not always bright, but I have to say, from what we have heard today, I think we have to relearn the fact that areas of happiness mean that not only do we need to be able to respect each other, but we also have to respect the fact that when we have the ups and downs, we're also still building on that awesome story that keeps on moving forward, whether it's personal or professional. So remember today that it isn't just about the ups and downs, the highlights of your story, and maybe even trying to always be consistently high on the awesome things that are happening. It's okay to fall back a little bit, take a respite, maybe be boring for that matter, but it's about getting back into the main part of the story, being active in your life, and changing the status quo that might be the status quo that you've always lived in for such a long time. Your story is so important, and whether you think it is or not, know this: there's somebody that's counting on you to interact with them so that they are able to continue their story. But also the people that are interacting with you are going to help you generate the story that you have yet to write. Even if you think that you're just a plain Jane or even somebody else, for that matter, that might be just written off as just a subplot to the overall story. Don't let them hold you back. Because, hey, who's the main character of your story? Isn't it you? I think it is. And I think that's why you should give yourself a little bit more credit than just writing yourself off as if you never existed. Because you're not just a plant or just a piece of shrubbery or just a prop in that overall story. You matter, no matter what role that you play. Thanks for listening to episode number 125 of Speaking from the Heart, and I look forward to hearing from your heart very soon.
Thanks for listening. For more information about our podcast and future shows, search for Speaking from the Heart to subscribe and be notified wherever you listen to your podcasts. Visit us at www.yourspeakingvoice.biz for more information about potential services that can help you create the best version of yourself. See you next time.